Distant worlds, impossible situations, and adventures you only dreamed about. That's where box and blister card art took you. Pulling you into strange new worlds the toy promised you'd go, while your mother pulled you right back out and into reality. I'm Victor, and straight out of the Gen experience, the art of action figure and toy packaging, the illustrations that lured us in and away from our spending money. Sometimes the artistic representation was a little more fantasy than toy reality. So let's explore the long-lost tradition and score the best action figure artwork versus the real thing from my favorite franchises and yours made famous in the 1980s. We're just having fun here, folks, so don't take it too seriously. So relax and enjoy the show. Swords and Sorcery, Conan the Barbarian, and Frank Frazetta-inspired artwork told a story that engaged the senses and kept us from putting that box or blister card down. We stared deeply into the world of Eternia with deep rich colors and lifelike figures drawn with adventure and excitement. If only the toy would follow suit. MOTU officially debuted in early '82, so when we saw the cartoon in late 1983, we did note the differences from the toy. Remember, this is a comparison between box art and the toy, not the cartoon. But we had already grown accustomed to the action figures and its box art. And although the images on the blister card were detailed and filled with storytelling mechanisms that helped us fill in the blanks, most of the characters had a comparable visage inside the bubble. Maybe not as detailed, not quite as raw realism, or in the female's case, not as feminine. However, MOTU toys were not a completely alternate reality from their artistic representation when we got them off the card or out of the box. You could even excuse the articulation that holds you back from dynamic poses seen on the packaging. But hell, even the card back cross-cell art straddled a line that was more toy-centric in shape, but hand-drawn and colored in a way that removed their construction and articulation lines to give us a sense of realism, not far removed from the panel of art on the package or in the pack-in comic that we had seen before. Well, maybe except when it came to Merman. Honestly, we just needed to fill in our own backdrop. The dark and unrelenting landscape of that world our toys would have to play upon would have to come straight from our imagination. Or one of the awesome playsets. The art is A+, even if the artwork expectation versus the toy reality gets a B+. Well, maybe closer to A-. Just remember, this has nothing to do with the quality of art masterpieces by artists such as Rudy Abrero or Errol McCarthy, but the comparison between the box art and the plastic plaything inside. Straddling the line of fashion doll and action figure, He-Man's twin sister She-Ra burst onto the scene in '85 with color card backs and blister card art that connected it to the Masters of the Universe legacy, but with the whimsical and pastel color schemes. Coming out after Golden Girls, She-Ra may have learned what to avoid, but we'll get to them in just a minute. The Princess of Power toy line characters did not exactly look like the designs on their packages, but they were so damn near close to our little eyes, these could have just been photos of the toy itself. Sure, they render them in poses that your figure could never be depicted doing, but as a child, those are the gaps we fill in with our imagination. Maybe Bo gets a little shafted with his bulbous head in comparison to his own art representation, but the ladies of Etheria shine through their artwork. We might have had the cartoon on our brain, but the box art likenesses get an A for their compatibility to the in-hand counterpart. Even those optimistic and bright backgrounds of the artwork made Etheria not a far stretch to imagine during your play. Working hard to get us excited, the Transformers toy line was released the same year as the cartoon, 1984, a great vintage year. You knew these characters from TV, and the package illustration showed a bot ready for action, poised and prepared for battle next to the actual figure visible through the window, albeit in their vehicle or alt mode. Once free and transformed though, most of us were a little surprised to find out that where G.I. Joe had about a dozen points of articulation, Transformers only had one. No, seriously, one, maybe two. Okay, many more of them had two, possibly three, but it was not uncommon to have a robot figure that could only move its arms up and down. That's it. But who cares? If we are going by form follows function, the function was to transform, and they did that miraculously. The engineering marvel took precedent over posability, so frankly, the illustrations on the outside Although clearly trying to represent the actual robot with more accuracy than the cartoon ever did, the designers opted for plausible deniability, putting our heroes in unbelievable poses that young imaginations would have to work extra hard to pretend our favorite Autobot or Decepticon were performing. It was never going to happen. With articulation not just secondary but tertiary, at least the minimalistic neon graph backgrounds were pretty ubiquitous. They could be the digital grid of Tron's light cycles for all we knew, letting our creativity run wild with where the adventures would take our new favorite toy. Knees and elbows bending? Ha, forget about it. To say the artwork was false advertising, well, we'll leave that to lawyers. Fortunately, they didn't go as far as to completely lie to us about Ratchet and Ironhide like the cartoon did. If you picked up these two guys after seeing the TV series, you were left wondering whether to scratch your watch or wind your butt. So for all that articulation nonsense, Transformers box art versus reality gets a C+. Okay, a B- because their artwork certainly looks like the toy. Just keep reminding yourself this has nothing to do with the art quality or the style. It's simply my comparison from the artwork to the action figure. None of these toy lines were live-action movies or TV shows, so unlike Star Wars, packaging for the infamous 1980s toy lines with accompanying cartoon marketing relied heavily on artistic interpretation. Interpretations that were often made before character models were finalized for the animation. Like Transformers, the artwork for G.I. Joe: A Real American Hero includes minimalistic, almost non-existent backgrounds. The fiery burst we are all familiar with and brings us great joy to see was the original dynamic image depicting the very realistic representation of the action figure juxtaposed on it to garner our attention. And boy did it ever. As blister cards go, unlike Masters of the Universe, which had some watercolor seen on the card back, the detailed oil painting type rendering of the Joe in full action pose gave us immediate emotional response. It was front and center, and despite any visual differences or plastic limitations between the action figure and the in-motion illustration, the fact that the toy was positioned right next to the art confirmed to our brains that this was one and the same, and they were capable of any action pose. Our imagination soared, and that figure was waiting to break free into whatever adventure you could think up. As G.I. Joes are designed as very real human characters in a very real world, it stands to reason that the expectation of the blister card art versus the toy itself is seamless and gets a solid A-. Why the minus? Simply put, the way they handled classics like Scarlet, Lady J, and Zorana. The comparison between the blister card representation and the real thing drops fast with the females. I know it was a boy-centric line, but I guess we have to strike it up to early 80s toy-making limitations. In the end though, I dare anyone not to like the design element of a real American hero. I might not have collected gem dolls, but the cartoon was, pardon the expression, outrageous. And I'm not embarrassed to say I watched it religiously. Sure, selling dolls and fashions was the goal, but the creative team made some engaging stories and thrilling serials for both girls and boys. But as a toy, I noticed the box art, and if you haven't paid attention to the next level illustrations by the incomparable Sharon Nettles, then you're missing out. The colors and attitude exuded by every character is the definition of nonverbal communication, telling us how we should feel about the content our brains are receiving. The statuesque art of each figure is a blend of a fashion designer's sketches, yet fully fleshed out and formed, and a fashion photographer, complete with the expected movement of a bright-eyed, fresh-faced model making love to the camera. But we can't forget the real star. The bright and garish 1980s glory on full display is something to behold. A quick glance gives you almost the entire narrative, assisted by some minimal backgrounds. From the story of a secret identity, to music executive, to band members, to the good, the bad, and the ugly love triangle, all set amongst the neon and geometrical patterns, seamlessly blended into palm trees that sold the glamorous 1980s California. Which makes sense, as Gem was Hasbro's rival to Barbie and her Malibu beginnings. A perfect blend of music and clothes of the MTV obsessed generation, you were promised amazing toys. Then you open the box. Having a cohesive and obvious storyline gave Gem a strong foothold over Barbie, but Barbie could not be matched for her beauty of injected molded plastic. The gimmick of Gemstar earrings and pack-and-tape cassettes might have had you overlooking Gem's huge-ass head. Larger than life and bold-faced designs that seemed out of proportion could never have beat the demure grace of Barbara, or the rockers that debuted out of a corporate espionage plan to crush Gem. For a graphic design lover like me, I'd stick with the package art. I'll still give Jem a wishy-washy C plus B minus. Even though the doll looks more infantile than the promise of the mature working woman that jumped off both the box art and the animated series, their aesthetic is not a complete alternate universe. Jem's cartoon could have continued, but the doll's demise was, as I like to say, a mercy killing. So have I hit your favorites so far? Put it down in the comments so we can talk about the best artwork ever. Mask action figures were similar to G.I. Joe, except half their 3 3/4 inch height. I don't do math, so good luck with that. The characters of Kenner's Mask with names straight out of a soap opera like Calhoun Burns, Vanessa Warfield, Jacques Lafleur, and Hondo McLean were realistic human beings of Earth, and standard proportions and no superpowers, besides the ones that came from their convenient and mysteriously powered helmets, and those awesome vehicles cleverly disguised as alternate battle machines, making them somehow cousins to the Transformers. The box art on each package was nicely crafted detail action scenes of perilous road adventures between the heroes and their enemies. Venom, like Cobra. Another reason Mask is a love child between Transformers and G.I. Joe. Their small scale worked perfectly with the incredibly detailed cars, and the articulated knees that even Star Wars never adopted was a great benefit to driving those vehicles. Although there were photos on the toy boxes, the majority of the front was amazing art that once you got the toy out and the labels on it, even without jointed elbows, a kid could find themselves in the same precarious situations as the Mask team did from these amazing adventure scenes depicted in the art. The only reason to give this artistic representation versus reality an A- would be for the figure's soulless blank eyes. Not even eyebrows. The unsettling ghostly pallor of absolute nothingness, except Julio's mustache, had them wearing their helmets more often than not, which was also great to not lose them. What did you think of the Mask pack-in posters and other media artwork for that line? When a toy line doesn't spring for an original artwork on separate toys to represent the action figure, the vehicle, or the playset, you got the one-and-done commissioned logo piece. Appearing on all products, it was better than nothing, and sometimes the art was stellar, while other times the misinterpretation was unforgivable. Here's some ratings for a few of those lines who put little importance or effort on the inspiring individual artwork for each toy and went the way of the logo toy representation. Bravestarr is a clear winner in the logo art for a toy line. Coming out in 1982, Bravestarr on the logo art represents his action figure quite well. And the design does give us the feeling of the storyline with its font and the basic visuals of a sword and a dragon in the shot. Each character would be emblazoned with this one piece, but for a logo title piece of packaging art, it gets an A. Okay, I'm not saying these dolls should come with a paper bag accessory to place over their heads, but compared to the Golden Girl package art, the end results don't quite gel with the barbarian beauty depicted in the fine art stamped on every box as the logo illustration. Similar to Jem's 5-head instead of a 4-head noggin, they don't quite translate as well as some of the others, especially the prints. Ooh, for that, they get a D. What do you think? Too harsh? Battle Beast was a joint effort between Hasbro and Takara in 1987. The package artwork kept the title logo and the box illustration fairly separate, but the consistency for these collect-em-all figures represented the line almost perfectly. You can see the drawings are practically spot on with their toyetic style from the figure. In this category, they get an A. Just barely more than an artistic title, Supernaturals came close to a total fail, but the added border of what looks to be a haunted forest at least gave us an emotional response, a feeling of dread that seemed to make sense with these short-lived and often forgotten supernatural hologram figures. They do pass, but barely with a D. It's sad to report that such a loved franchise like the Thundercats was simply slapped with their title logo only. But as title logos go, Thundercats will go down in history, but the toy line suffers from no original artwork that helps inspire and draw the consumer in.
That is why you fail.
I'd like to be generous and give them a passing grade of a D-, but there just simply isn't any artistic representation there to even compare it to. There are so many other toy lines and examples of gorgeous and questionable box art, card back, cross-sell, and package illustrations, but I wanted to cover my favorite franchises made famous in the 1980s, and even some that went beyond my original toy playtime, but I never stopped paying attention to. But let me call out an honorable mention. Something often ignored, but as an art enthusiast, this action figure line without any media marketing used photography on their card backs in a way I had never seen. What made Glamour Gals unique, and no, not this version 1 Taylor Swift in the commercial, is the doll photographed in front of a real-life, real-world picture to match their style. like little sets for this 1981 line of 3 3/4 inch figures. For a girl-targeted line to counter their own Star Wars, nicely played, Kenner. If you're interested in more, please check out the picture-perfect 1987 Visionary blister card art, or the well-done Sectars from '85, and the small but mighty portraits of the 1986 Bravestarr's characters for their individual figure packages. I also found that the Centurions from 1986 had gone quite literal with illustrations of the actual figure in all their angular structured glory. Probably the most realistic artistic representation of the whole lot that was still not a photograph. So which one of these was your favorite, or did I miss it altogether? As you can tell, they all got pretty great scores just simply because we don't see this anymore and we miss it. Please consider giving me a like and helping out the channel by subscribing. I love this topic and find it a lot of fun. Plus, I'm a collector and really adore action figure and toy art. It is a lost, well, art in modern times, but like most things worth remembering, their heyday was during the Gen experience. Thanks for joining me. Check out other great content from this legendary era. If you've already subscribed, thank you so much. I've been having a blast reliving the best years of our lives. Come back soon, and until next time.